There is a specific type of man women will never truly respect or love. And the most dangerous part about this reality is that he usually thinks he is doing everything right. He is the man who shows up early, listens intently to every word, and commits without hesitation. He willingly sacrifices his time, his personal energy, and his emotional boundaries just to ensure the relationship stays afloat. In his mind, he is executing the perfect blueprint of a good partner. Yet, instead of becoming more desired, a strange and brutal paradox occurs. He slowly becomes optional, completely replaceable, and entirely taken for granted. He watches the woman he loves grow increasingly distant, answering text messages later and later until she eventually leaves, often offering nothing more than a vague, confusing explanation like, "I just need space," or "I feel like something is missing." It is a devastating, soul-crushing experience for a man because nothing feels more confusing or unfair than losing someone after giving them your absolute best. But what if the problem was never that you didn't give enough? What if the actual root cause of the heartbreak is far more uncomfortable to face? The reality most men fail to see is that the exact behaviors we are taught to believe create love, the absolute selflessness, the constant availability, the emotional compliance, are the very things quietly destroying her attraction. This video isn't here to offer you gentle comfort or pat you on the back. It is here to expose a deep, underlying truth about female psychology that most men learn far too late in life, completely rewriting the script on what actually separates the men women remain intensely drawn to from the ones they slowly stop wanting. This isn't going to be easy to hear, but it is entirely necessary to understand if you ever want to break the cycle of being the nice guy who finishes last. Most men grow up conditioned by movies, media, and societal tropes to believe a noble but deeply flawed lie, the illusion of transactional love. We are taught that if you love a woman deeply enough, she is fundamentally obligated to love you back. Men approach romance through a lens of moral logic and static acceptance. When a man decides he loves a woman, he chooses to accept her entire reality as a fixed truth. He accepts her flaws, her complicated past, her emotional volatility, and her worst days. His affection is anchored in a conscious, logical choice. I know exactly who you are, and I choose you anyway. Because men think this way, they naturally assume women process attraction through the exact same structural framework. They believe that as long as they remain authentic, consistent, and loyal, the foundation of the relationship is secure. But female psychology does not operate on effort-based rules or stagnant contractual commitments. Attraction is not a logical calculation. It is a fluid, biopsychological response to a man's real-time emotional state, his internal discipline, and his psychological center. A woman can feel immense affection for you, she can value your kindness, and she can genuinely care about your well-being, while simultaneously losing every ounce of sexual and romantic desire for you if you stop embodying the value that first drew her in. Her attraction is never anchored to who you were in a static historical sense. It is a direct, real-time response to what you consistently project in the present. The moment a man gets comfortable and assumes a past emotional connection guarantees future desire, he walks straight into a blind spot. Love for a woman is not a static promise carved in stone. It is an active emotional state, and states change instantly when the environment and your internal positioning change. To understand how to maintain that environment of attraction, men must completely redefine what strength actually means to a woman. When men hear the word strength, their minds instantly drift toward superficial metrics: financial status, career influence, physical size, or social dominance. While those things might capture initial attention and provide novelty, they are entirely incapable of holding a woman's deep, long-term respect once the novelty wears off. A woman does not truly bond to the material assets you possess. She responds instinctively to who you are when those assets are threatened and nothing is going your way. True masculine value is quiet, internal, and revealed through three specific, non-negotiable pillars. The first pillar is genuine emotional control, which must never be confused with emotional suppression. Suppression is toxic. It is the act of hiding your anger or anxiety behind a mask until you inevitably explode. True control is the rare ability to remain entirely grounded, calm, and unshakable when she is highly reactive, uncertain, or testing the emotional climate of the room. When your internal mood does not rise and fall based on her temporary validation or disapproval, she instinctively feels something crucial: psychological safety. The second pillar is absolute mental clarity. A man who possesses clarity knows exactly where he is going in life and what his principles are. He does not require a constant feedback loop or validation from his partner to ensure he is on the right path. He makes executive decisions without offering unnecessary apologies. He refuses to over-explain his logic, and he never argues his worth. His clear direction creates a natural gravity that people want to align with. The third pillar is psychological self-sufficiency, which extends far beyond financial independence. A woman needs to intuitively sense that your internal world works perfectly fine with or without her presence, that her involvement in your life is a beautiful choice, not a desperate requirement for your survival. The exact moment a woman realizes she has become the sole pillar holding up your emotional stability, the weight becomes suffocating and her romantic desire begins an immediate, irreversible collapse. It is vital to recognize that romantic attraction rarely dies in a massive, dramatic explosion. It doesn't usually end because of a single catastrophic fight or an overt act of betrayal. Instead, it bleeds out slowly and quietly through a psychological process called subconscious devaluation. This isn't a conscious, malicious decision a woman sits down and makes on a Tuesday afternoon. She doesn't wake up one morning and simply choose to stop liking you. Rather, her primitive brain continuously and automatically updates the survival and reproductive value it assigns to you based on your daily, microscopic micro-behaviors. The uncomfortable truth that most men refuse to admit is that they actively participate in their own devaluation without ever realizing it. Every single time you make a decision rooted in the fear of losing her rather than a place of internal abundance, her subconscious mind takes a mental snapshot. Every time you swallow your own values, stay quiet during a disagreement just to avoid rocking the boat, or tolerate disrespectful behavior because you are terrified of the alternative, something registers. You might tell yourself that you are being kind, understanding, and patient. But the female nervous system, which is constantly scanning the environment for genuine stability and unshakable strength, reads that exact compliance as pure weakness. Desire does not enter into a logical debate with this perception. It simply obeys the data it collects. When a man proudly proclaims, "I treated her better than anyone ever has, and she still left me for someone else," he is failing to realize that attraction is never a moral reward for good behavior. It is an involuntary biological response to your internal positioning. If your behavior proves you cannot afford to lose her, you immediately cease to be her solid ground. Modern dating advice has completely inverted the true relationship between time and value. Men are heavily conditioned to believe that time is the ultimate currency of romantic devotion. They assume that providing more presence, more constant closeness, and unrestricted access to their lives will naturally deepen the emotional bond. Logically, this makes perfect sense to the masculine mind. Invest more resources, get a greater return. Psychologically, however, human nature works in the exact opposite direction. To a woman, time that is too easily obtained, completely unrestricted, and entirely unconditional does not feel like a beautiful act of devotion. It feels like a total lack of internal life structure. When your time carries no personal weight, it completely loses its meaning, and when your presence loses its meaning, her attraction quietly vanishes. Consider the internal shift that occurs. A man thinks, "We are spending every waking hour together, so we must be growing closer." Meanwhile, the woman's nervous system is reading a completely different set of data. It concludes, "If I can access him, text him, and see him whenever I want without any effort, his life must have absolutely no momentum outside of me." Genuine attraction fundamentally requires contrast, emotional tension, and the constant underlying awareness that your presence is an active choice, not an automated guarantee. The moment you clear your entire calendar, cancel personal plans with friends, or rearrange your professional priorities just to accommodate her whim, you do not look deeply committed. You look completely collapsed. True scarcity is never about playing manipulative mind games or waiting a calculated number of minutes to reply to a text. It is about personal integrity. A man who profoundly values his own time, his mission, and his daily obligations communicates a high level of worth before he ever speaks a single word. One of the most critical turning points in a relationship is the line separating healthy appreciation from desperate validation seeking. It is a subtle distinction in language, but a massive chasm in underlying psychology, and it entirely dictates whether a woman's attraction grows or completely dies. Genuine appreciation is always grounded in absolute inner stability. It is clean, effortless, and traditionally masculine. It looks a woman in the eye and says, "I see the value you bring to my world, and I recognize it." It requires absolutely nothing in return. Validation seeking, however, is a needy emotional plea disguised as affection. It covertly says, "I am highly insecure about where I stand, so please look at me, reassure me, and tell me I am enough." When a man begins to rely on his partner to regulate his own emotional state, the underlying energy of the relationship fundamentally shifts. Men fall into the trap of paying compliments too frequently, confessing massive emotional attachments far too early in the dating process, and opening up their deepest vulnerabilities before mutual trust and polarity have been established. They look intensely for immediate reactions, watching her face for a smile, a nod, or an affirmation just to feel secure in themselves. From the male perspective, this behavior is viewed as beautiful honesty, healthy vulnerability, and deep connection. But to the female nervous system, it signals internal instability. She is forced to ask herself a deeply unsettling question. Why does this man need me to hold him together emotionally? This dynamic becomes painfully visible after physical intimacy, a moment where many men talk far too much, sharing their deep-seated fears and looking for reassurance of attachment. Closeness without structure dissolves the necessary polarity of a relationship. She no longer feels protected and cherished. Instead, she feels burdened by the responsibility of keeping you secure. And responsibility is the ultimate killer of sexual desire. The rise of modern digital communication has made it easier than ever for men to completely suffocate a woman's romantic interest. There is a widespread false belief among men that frequent daily texting is the glue that keeps a connection alive. They assume that staying in constant touch throughout the day proves high interest, establishes closeness, and effectively boxes out any potential romantic competition. But from a woman's psychological perspective, excessive low-value digital communication does not feel like romantic closeness. It feels like subtle surveillance and an intense digital fixation. When a man is constantly available to text, checking in every few hours and responding to messages within 30 seconds, he is communicating that he has absolutely nothing else competing for his attention. When nothing competes for your time, the perceived value of your time instantly plummets to zero. Silence itself is not what makes a man attractive, but rather what that silence implies. A man who isn't texting all day isn't mysterious because of a magic trick. He is mysterious because he is genuinely grounded in an external reality. He has a career to build, a body to train, a mind to cultivate, and a purpose to fulfill. The exact same psychological principle applies to the dangerous habit of premature commitment. Many men offer their absolute loyalty and exclusivity far too early in the dating phase as a desperate attempt to show sincerity and secure the relationship. They push to define the relationship and lock things down long before her attraction has actually stabilized. To a woman, this sudden rush does not signal romantic strength or masculine certainty. It signals intense emotional urgency and a fear of scarcity. It tells her that you are willing to invest your entire future in her before she has even earned your respect or proven her character. Safety provided without underlying desire quickly becomes a suffocating prison, and she will inevitably seek a way out. When we examine the dynamics of respect and authority within relationships, there is only one form of internal power that consistently and permanently influences human behavior, and yet the vast majority of men never manage to develop it. It is not aggressive dominance, it is not loud control, and it is certainly not emotional manipulation or pressure. Real, authentic power is the quiet, internal ability to walk away from anyone or anything without collapsing into pieces. This isn't a toxic bluff you use as a negotiating tactic to scare her. It must be a deeply rooted, lived reality. The exact moment a man loses the psychological capacity to pack his bags and leave a situation where his boundaries are violated, everything about his behavioral expression changes. Even if he tries his absolute best to mask his fear, his tone tightens, his decisions soften, his personal boundaries begin to blur, and his actions stop coming from a place of free choice. Instead, they come entirely from a desperate fear of abandonment. Women have an incredibly acute social radar. They sense this emotional entrapment instantly. When a woman realizes a man is fully trapped, whether emotionally, sexually, or financially, her subconscious mind begins to test the parameters of that trap. She pushes boundaries, she intentionally withdraws her attention, and she challenges his authority. When the man repeatedly fails these tests, not by enforcing a boundary, but by tolerating the disrespect and staying exactly where he is, the remaining attraction is completely eroded. Staying in an environment devoid of mutual self-respect does not look like unconditional love. It looks like a total lack of character. A woman never feels truly secure when you cling to her out of fear. She feels secure when she knows you are a free man who could walk away at any moment, but actively chooses to stand by her side. Ultimately, a man does not lose a woman's attraction simply because he feels a powerful sexual desire for her. Desire is entirely natural. He loses her attraction the exact moment that desire begins to steer his life decisions and compromise his discipline. When lust, infatuation, or the fear of being alone takes the steering wheel of a man's life, his priorities begin a quiet, destructive shift. His long-term life purpose gets postponed until tomorrow. His non-negotiable boundaries soften just to keep her happy, and his narrow focus shifts entirely away from his mission and onto her face. Without even realizing it, he demotes himself from being the leader of his own life and turns the woman into the absolute center of his universe. Women feel this energetic shift immediately, and it instantly alarms their nervous system. The man's attention suddenly feels incredibly heavy. His presence starts to lean forward with a desperate need, and what once felt like an exciting romantic pursuit now feels like a consuming, claustrophobic obligation. This is where the final breakdown occurs. Men misread the distance and believe that forcing more closeness, arranging more date nights, or begging for more intimacy will stabilize the sinking ship. But desire without absolute self-mastery achieves the exact opposite result. It pulls you completely off your axis. A woman fundamentally needs to feel that you are moving forward in life with momentum, with or without her cooperation. The man who can deeply enjoy his desire for a woman without ever being owned or ruled by his impulses becomes magnetic. That quiet restraint, that total authority over your own mind and body is the ultimate baseline of masculine strength. The man who controls his internal desire never has to chase. His self-control creates an undeniable gravity that naturally draws respect, loyalty, and lasting attraction exactly where it belongs.